We speak. Our words. We listen.
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 Hello and welcome again to Autistic Radio. Yes, it's Christmas, but we're still here. Today we're going to have Harry's Facebook conversation, the last one of the current run before we get into Radio Days. And Radio Days will be on the 27th, 28th, 29th and 30th of December. There will be 4 extra Harry's Facebook programs at 5:55 on each of those days between Christmas and New Year. There'll also be 4 extra programs of the 444 drop-in, and it will be at 444 every one of those days. The 27th, 28th, 29th and 30th of December. In the previous 2 hours, let me guess, at the 111 slot and the 222 slot, there will be some podcasts that we play and some talk and chat in between. So if there's any possibility that you need a break from all the festivities between Christmas and New Year, then join us to either listen or take part.
I'm going to interrupt and just advertise what we're doing here in case there's something specific here that you want to get involved in with us. We're making a recording coming into the springtime of 2025 about sex. Sex, drugs, rock and roll. We're pushing the boundaries. We've got a couple of professionals coming and talking to us, but we want you to have a voice and we want you to direct some of the things. I'm not entirely comfortable with some of the ways that I interpret the work of the 2 people that are coming up. So I need an autistic angle on this, if anybody's out there to help us. And the second one is we now have the go for a series looking at ABA from a very autistic point of view. We have essentially platformed a group of behaviorists, and they have come to describe their take, and we have found common ground in that. It has been surprising. But we really do need now voices from the autistic community to maybe give challenge to some of the things that they have heard. We will make sure that this is respectful all the way through. But I am being encouraged by members I respect of the autistic community to continue this difficult task of having an open conversation with the behaviourist community.
This is live Unmasked for Sunday, the 22nd of December 2024, and this is where we share Facebook posts and have discussions around the topics that are included in them. So the first post is from Embrace Autism, which is a mental health service, science website, diagnostic centre, also described as research-based information and empowered by autistics for autistics. Embrace your advantages. And what they've shared is about a condition called myopia. And it says 10.8% of autistics and even 17.2% of level 1 autistics experience myopia, nearsightedness. You would think it's a challenge rather than a strength, but while they see blurry from afar, up close, myopics are able to resolve more detail. Common sensory strength.
I've just got to throw in the idea that often people use the term myopic when they're talking about somebody who's just got a singular point of view. And to think of that in the context of the autistic community is curious, to say the least.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I mean, the language that kind of thrown me, and I think I've read something like this before, probably something similar, and it says level 1 autistic. And I'm thinking, what do they mean by level 1 autistic? And that's before even looking into what myopia is. And then you've kind of described a bit of it yourself, that it's like a singular, it's like something that's very limited. So it's an interesting one.
Yeah, you've got me, Harry, with this level 1 autistics. What does that mean? Nearsightedness can come at any point in your life, and I don't think it's really necessarily attached to being autistic. So there's a lot of confusion here. Hoping to have it resolved.
I don't know. I think it's when something's linked with autism or someone's experiencing someone who is autistic, it seems there's a lot of negative. So I think it's trying to give more positive language. But yeah, right, it does seem a bit strange to kind of link up all of this, unless it's been totally misunderstood. But I can understand what you're saying. It does seem a bit strange, even if it's trying to be positive.
It might be tied to the idea of hyperfocus, which people tend to consider.
The next post is from Asking Autistics, which is an autistic podcast by autistic people. And what they've shared is something which is sourced from betterhelp.com, and it's called What Stimming Can Look Like. And it's saying like flapping hands, repeating phrases or words, rubbing the skin or scratching, biting fingernails, moving fingers vigorously, repetitive blinking, walking or pacing on tiptoes, rearranging or moving things, pulling hair, playing with hair, staring at moving or rotating objects like a wheel or fan, and smelling objects or people.
I suffer a wee bit from rubbing the skin. Whether I'd call it stimming or not, it's another thing, but I can see the reason why it's considered this way. There are a lot of sources for this information, and it's a wee bit like, you go to the shop and there's all these dictionaries. But yeah, it's helpful, and it's a colourful wee diagram if somebody is curious about all this and is what to process this kind of information. Staring at moving or rotating objects like a wheel or fan. I suppose you could put the washing machine in there too, eh?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's things there that I can identify with. Biting nails is one. I suppose moving fingers vigorously. Rearranging or moving things, but what I tend to do is, if it's not rearranging or moving things in terms of physically, it's like moving files or rearranging lists and things like that. Scratching and rubbing skin, possibly. I think I have done that. And I have noticed that sometimes even repeating phrases or words can come into play as well. So a lot of that, yeah, I can identify.
I think a large part of our lives is repeating phrases or words. I think that's how we're taught, isn't it? But I'm having a wee chuckle at smelling people. Smelling objects, obviously, it's like I'm always checking if something's off.
Yeah, that one I'm not really sure about what it's actually meaning, but then so many of us are different. There must be some example of that. Smelling objects, yes, but people. When someone says something like that, you're thinking someone going up to someone and sniffing them, and I don't mean that in a perverse way, I just mean it just looks a strange thing anyway. But I'm unsure what actually that's about.
Well, I used to annoy certain friends of mine because when I went to visit them and then come home, I had this odour on me that I couldn't get rid of for about a day or two. And it was something to do with my nose. And I put down like something like they had leather settees, or they'd been using some kind of cleaning agent on it, or they'd been using shake and vac on their carpets or something. Or turns out it was probably just me having mouldy shoes. But, you know, I just got a wee bit obsessed about it. And people went, God, you're always smelling something, aren't you? And it began to get a point where, like, you know, when I went places, if it had a particular smell that I disliked, I'd be really put off.
The next post is from Joy of Autism, which is a personal blog. It's a page dedicated to my son Jacob and for all the autistics and their families and friends. My goal is to inform, advocate, educate and share smiles. And what they've shared is their own quote. There is a child with autism who's taught me more about life than this world ever will.
The idea of the authenticity of the child being a kind of inspiration for the parents, say, or the adult carer with their own autism, which is often quite conditioned and vague to source. You can see the intimate expressions of a child, but I think this is maybe a bit more than that. So it's a personal imperative in here.
Yeah, but it's quite touching. I mean, sometimes these things can sometimes sound patronising to some people who may misunderstand what it's actually meaning. But as you say, it does touch on for the conversation we're talking about, where adults can discover through their children and the way the children behave, and they're behaving in a way that you were possibly told off of behaving, in terms of feeling distressed by a certain thing, but you're getting told as a child there's nothing to be distressed about, you're overreacting, or maybe they're just saying calm down, you know, there's no need to act like this. But then you see it in your own child. It must be very inspiring in terms of it opens your eyes and you learn a lot about not just about your child but about yourself. So that is very true from other people's experience that I'm aware of.
This is a bit double-edged because the conversation we were having was with an autistic mother of autistic children, and the likelihood is that the original creator of a meme like this is somebody who is non-autistic and is looking at us as this wonder group, how a disabled child teaches them all kinds of things like patience, etc. So if you look at it from an autistic point of view within the neurodivergent family, yes, I would say that exactly what you guys have been saying. You know, it is that wonder that a child can teach you who is unfiltered in the world and authentically themselves until we bash them into shape when they start off natural. But when it's looking back from a kind of non-autistic point of view, and you are looking at us as though we are these almost pets and freaks of wonderment, it's a little bit difficult for me to get in touch with it. You know, it can come, same message, different mouthpieces, feels very different to me.
That is a fair point. I mean, we've talked about all kinds of inspirational and very touching quotes and descriptions that have been made in the past. It all depends on where it originated from and who says it. And even if it originated from something that we would not really be really keen on, but hearing someone's perspective on it, it can turn it around and actually make some kind of sense, give some sort of inspiration. It just shows you how amazing individualistic language can be, using the same words that other people use.
let me take away my grumpiness. Let me say how wonderful it is that any parent, whatever neurotype, looks upon their child and takes inspiration from them. That is a beautiful thing. And I am absolutely behind them with that. So from wherever it comes, I understand the intention and the beauty behind it. I just bring up the other thing because some people will feel that just is a bit off if it comes from a neurotypical standpoint. And so that's kind of like an information service, isn't it? To just say what somebody might be sensitive about. It's not really trying to hurt anybody if they're doing a wonderful thing and saying a lovely thing.
The next post is from the autistic teacher, who's a public figure, autistic and proud, sharing insight and understanding to help the autistic community, based in the UK. And what they're talking about is about internal experiences of autism. Autism is often associated with traits that are seen on the outside with little recognition or understanding of what is happening on the inside. Just because we don't see it, it doesn't mean it isn't happening or any less valid. This is where it becomes vital that we learn about autism from autistic people, those who actually experience it. Autism in girls. There is misunderstanding that autistic girls have autistic traits that are internalized and that autistic boys always show autistic traits externally. This is incorrect. Any gender can present with autistic traits that are internalized or externalized. So I just want to make it clear, this is not just a girl thing. Autistic traits could be internalized by anyone. Sensory differences. We might actually be hypersensitive and hyposensitive. You could be a person who is hypersensitive and find touch uncomfortable while enjoying deep pressure hugs. Or maybe it's those lighter touches when someone just brushes past you that makes you feel uncomfortable. It can also depend on other things like being tired or full of energy, anxious or already feeling overwhelmed. Our sensory profile can fluctuate. All these things are internalized. We might show our discomfort and joy on the outside, hand flapping, smiling, grimacing, turning away, or we might suppress our sensory experience like discomfort. For example, sitting in a room that's too hot, too bright, or too noisy, because you feel what's expected of you. That masking and suppression is exhausting and takes its toll in physical and mental health. Situational mutism. Autistic people can sometimes struggle with communication and social anxiety. This can lead to situational mutism. Often it is dismissed as, oh, they're just shy. But as someone who was situational mute as a child and can still experience it now, it feels like someone stole my words. It's more than just shy. There's literally no way and no choice. All the words in my head are swirling around and can't come out. The devastation, the anxiety, the frustration are all internalized. Echolalia. I knew about echolalia repeating sounds or words out loud, but I experience words, questions, senses, sounds repeating again and again in my head, sometimes over each other. There is no way of turning it off. Trying to focus on something when my head is spinning with words can make me physically sick, bring me to tears. My echolalia is internalized and can be overwhelming. Hyperempathy. Although there is sometimes still an autistic stereotype that autistic people don't have empathy, many autistic individuals often experience heightened sensitivity and empathy. Hyper-empathy can make it difficult for us to filter out the emotions of others, leading to emotional exhaustion and sometimes even burnout. It can feel very overwhelming to watch particular films or programs or to be in an emotionally charged environment. Anxiety. Anxiety can have a significant impact on the daily lives of autistic people. We may experience heightened anxiety due to challenges with social interactions, sensory differences, and past autistic experiences. It can lead to increased stress in social settings, anxiety in unfamiliar environments, anxiety around foods, difficulty focusing on tasks, rigidity of routine, increased masking, which can lead to exhaustion, shutdowns, or meltdowns. One way to support autistic people is by practicing empathy and patience and striving to learn more about autism. Internal traits are just as valid and important. By being understanding and accommodating, we can help more autistic people feel more comfortable and accepted in their daily lives.
I appreciate this one, Harry, because a lot of this stuff comes round a lot and just seems like memes. But this one is actually exploring these commonly held ideas and relating to them personally, which is giving it a personal feel. And of course, it's about internal aspects of all these things. So when I was hearing about hyper-empathy, it made me think something that's been coming up in my mind recently, which is like, I think a lot of the time I avoid social situations because of empathy. It is too exhausting emotionally to be around emotion. Some of the other things as well, echolalia, hearing things in your own head. A lot of this reminds me of what they call the somatic aspect, like the body experience beyond the mind, or the mind as part of the body. And so to have a repeating loop or echoing in your own head with thoughts and words is almost a bit like having a strained muscle. Or, when you've been exposed to something that's a bit too much for you or a bit stressful, there's a reaction. And I sometimes think the words in your head can be a bit of that. It's just repeating a wee bit as a sensation. Although we do overthink too. But situational mutism is one of the big ones for me, because that's how I can go way back and see it's probably where it all happened or appeared socially in schooling. And it sort of ties in with what I believe is like this lack of connection. We are connected all the time, but sometimes we just feel disconnected.
It was interesting to read the word situational mutism, because I've heard it may be or may not be the same thing, but I've heard selective mutism. But then I think they're talking about situational mutism actually not being a choice. It's kind of brought on you by anxiety and strain. So maybe it's not the same.
I'm going to have a guess at a bit of a definition there for you, Harry, and I'm sure our listeners will correct me. Selective mutism is a term from the medical sphere which describes a patient that is completely able to speak and vocalizes in one situation, but then in another situation, according to the medical model, selects or chooses not to vocalize. Situational mutism is the same experience described from an autistic point of view, where somebody describes that in certain situations, they find it that they are unable or cannot access their voice to select it, to actually make the voice come from their brain. And I experience that in very rare circumstances nowadays, but I did experience it as a child more often. You just cannot access your voice. Almost like a stage fright kind of thing.
The next post is from Neurodivergent Lou, who's a blogger, finding a place in a neurotypical world. And what they've shared is about the struggle of not realising you are autistic because you took the diagnosis criteria literally. I feel that it often isn't recognised that autistic people may take the diagnostic criteria, questionnaires and assessment questions literally. Sometimes as a result of the way the questions and diagnostic criteria are phrased, autistic people may not recognise how our experience fit within this. Autistic people may not therefore pick up on the fact that we are autistic. This is inevitably likely to affect, multiply, marginalise autistic people to a greater extent too. Part of being autistic can involve taking information literally, and this likely extends to the autism diagnosis criteria and questionnaires. Autistic people, too, may think in a black and white way, making it sometimes difficult to see the grey area in a question or statement. We may be more likely to assume that we don't experience an autistic trait when actually we do. It also feels incredibly important to recognise that autistic people may mask autistic traits to the point that their autistic traits aren't picked up on by others, even if they have a significant impact on the person's life. This highlights the importance of understanding the internal experience of being autistic as well as the external experience. For example, for me, in some situations, I may be able to mask to the point where my persistent difficulties with social communication and interaction may not be visible by others. However, from the inside, I may be carefully monitoring my own communication and mimicking how other people act. This can make me feel exhausted, impact my mental health and sense of self. For me, I struggle with changing routines. However, for a long time, I assumed that I didn't struggle with routine or change because I didn't always relate to the way that I had been seen this discussed. The diagnosis criteria describes restricted and repetitive patterns of behaviours, activities or interests. I struggle, for example, with becoming unable to do anything when the time for an appointment or plan changes, constant unspecific anxiety related to the future, and difficulty when we have to change the route that we usually travel. Struggles with change can also show up as not being able to transition between tasks, for example, extreme difficulty getting out of bed. When food packaging or recipe changes, we may be unable to eat the food ever again. Struggling with buying or using new things, becoming overwhelmed when the layout of a room changes, difficulty coming to the end, starting a new TV series or book. Some of the questions in the autism quotient seem to be quite random too. For example, preferring to go to the library over a party is seen to be a potential indicator of being autistic. However, those asking the questions may not take into consideration the underlying reasons behind this. Autistic people can enjoy parties and be very social. Questions which only rely on stereotypical snapshots may be confusing and lead to an autistic person not being picked up as autistic.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the effort that's put into constructing something like this by someone. You know, they're really putting themselves out there personally. To do that takes a lot of confidence, self-expression, let's say. And I appreciate it. It's some of that, the changes section really made me think a little bit, you know. I mean, on a humorous aside, you know, I hate it when they change food packaging. Why did they make cheese and onion crisps blue? Anything blue to do with food is weird. But looking at some of those things, yeah, like difficulty coming to the end or starting a new book, even being in someone else's house in a different bed. I appreciate a wee post like this if it is what I think it is.
It kind of links up to, I feel, what we've discussed before. It's like these things are put into place as tests to identify a diagnosis or to identify something. But for them to do that, what they're doing is they're giving a stereotype approach. So they're given these sort of question and answer things, and it's like a lot of people will be missed because it's that stereotypical that they'll miss out because it's just like the lack of understanding of what's being asked. I mean, I can totally get that because of the stereotype that it's kind of structured towards, and what they'll say they'll do that to try and keep it simple so it's fair for everybody. But as it's just been described, it certainly isn't. It's not an easy thing to do, I suppose, but it just shows how many people can fall through the cracks and the reasons why. Because I can identify with a lot of things there.
Yeah, Harry, I can see that line of thinking, but I had the NHS diagnosis, and I'm sure, even though I was very possibly masking, and I wasn't trying to, you know, push my case, let's put it that way, I gave myself away. I must have done, because it turned out the way it did. I revealed myself, regardless. And I think that might be the bottom line, but I may be terribly wrong about that.
The next post is from Emergence Divergence, the Neurodivergent Ramblings of David Gray Hammond, who is an author of books, writer of blogs, advocate, mentor, trainer, and professional nuisance. And what he shared is something that maybe has to be said, and it's something that sounds so simple, but probably needs to be said. Autistic people are allowed to dislike things. Not everything is a challenge for us to overcome. Someone very accurately made the point that sometimes we just don't like something. While I would argue that my autistic brain is the defining factor in my likes and dislikes, I'm allowed to dislike stuff without someone helping me to overcome that and learn to like it.
Can someone explain to me what he means by overcome? I mean, what's the process he's referring to there?
I think basically it's someone saying, if you don't like something, that's like someone trying to make you like it and say, why don't you like it, and say all the good things about it to try and make you, basically condition you to like something that you don't particularly like naturally. That's what it seems to me. Behaviourist, maybe?
It's about personal challenge or external challenge, isn't it? If Harry's looking at it from the point of view and saying, this is somebody saying that if you don't like something, like a woolly balaclava in my case when I was a kid, that you should just get used to it and you should try and work at it and overcome that challenge of that horrible, itchy, woolly balaclava around your face. And in the end, that was not going to be one of the challenges that I ever overcame. If I have a balaclava that I need for some kind of activity now, if it's not silk or if it's not some kind of man-made silk alternative or hemp, it's not going to go anywhere near my face and it's never going to change, and that is never going to be overcome. But some people insist that normalizing people in their so-called challenges, whether that be stimming, no flappy hands, sit on your hands, kid, don't move in your seat, all these kind of things that we are used to, perhaps from our generation, really do come into the area of bad practice in behaviorism. And the majority of behaviorism out there in the world is quite prescriptive of what children should be doing, and it goes against the nature of the child. We have versions of various kind of behaviorist techniques that are moving so far away from that they are almost in the area of neurodivergent thought. But how far that's spread, it's difficult for us to know, because I think we're talking to a very small group of people. So yeah, I get what you're saying, Harry, but I also get the point that Ray's saying, in that we do have challenges in our lives and we do overcome them. I'm never going to get over that balaclava challenge, but I eat an awful lot of different foods that I never ate when I was a child, but it's been my choice.
I think it's the general language of little statements like this that confused me, because it didn't explain it like you just did there by giving examples. It was just like a general statement about likes and dislikes and overcoming them. And so I thought about it generally.
Well, I put forward the proposition that's why Harry has this show. He picks out the pieces so that we can then put the flesh on the bones. And sometimes I talk bollocks, and sometimes I get it a little bit okay, as we all do, you know?
It's all about conversation, and what I like about what we do here is it doesn't need to be something that says that much, but it can be something that might mean one thing to one person, or may mean another thing to a different person. And that's what makes our conversations so interesting. The next post is from Neurodivergent Girl, which is a personal blog from a married mum of 2 boys, diagnosed ADHD and autistic, low support needs. This is a safe space. And they've shared a quote from Kate Curran. Being neurodivergent means that I over-explain everything in hopes of clear communication, but then get anxious that my over-explanation was irritating and actually made things more confusing.
Love people to give me paragraphs so that I get the whole thing from them. I love this autistic communication that takes a while and comes from different angles. I was at a volunteer place in the Pyrenees a few years back, and the woman there said, and she's listening to me trying to explain something that was quite important, and she was smiling because she says, I got that. I watch what you do, and I pick this piece and I pack that piece and all these different pieces, and then you bring it all together like this. And she was embracing it. And I felt pleased as punch that somebody got me then. I felt pleased. And, you know, surely this is a part of autistic communication that we should be embracing between each other, especially here on Autistic Radio. Windbags, come on.
Yeah, totally agree. I wonder if this poster is maybe, I don't know if she's being self-critical about it. I think she's just saying, yeah, this is just the way it is, let's go. But wait a minute, what did she say at the end there? My over-explanation was irritating and actually made things more confusing. She was anxious about that. Right, yeah. Is that bit where you get kind of well into your explanation and your story, and then you lose the thread? That can be quite annoying, because you totally forget the point that you were aiming for. Or you turn to the person who's listening and you can see them getting a wee bit fidgety, and you say, you know, I'm getting there, just need to fill in this wee bit and then I'll get there. So again, it's all about safe spaces, and she says that in her profile. A safe space is where that would be accepted.
For me, it also contains this female point of view. The misogyny here is that I'm white, privileged, male, certain age, and that comes with a whole load of get out of jail free cards as going, if I can be a windbag, it will be tolerated. But I watch my wife and daughter as they go around the world, and they are not afforded that same kind of luxury. There aren't the stereotypes that go with it. You know, the stereotypes generally about women who are speaking often or speaking too much are negative ones. And, well, as they are for men, I suppose, as well, to some degree. But it's still in it that she is going to experience this worse. She's going to be judged harsher.
I appreciate you making that point. And I saw something earlier on today, and there was a woman speaking about something quite deep. And she had a pace there, she was taking her time talking. She wasn't particularly slow, but she wasn't rushing not to take up space. And I saw the comments underneath being like, oh, I hate when women speak as slow as that. And it just, like you said, it had that smack of misogyny of not wanting to take that time to hear or to listen. And I think that I can really relate to what that post was saying about feeling like the embarrassment of the over explaining or having that as part of your communication style. And then, like, it was great hearing everyone talking about, actually how it's great when that's embraced. And I know I personally love if I'm listening to somebody who's passionate about something and let them take me on their train of thought journey with them so that I can have an experience of understanding something that a perspective I wouldn't be able to get to on my own.
Yeah, passion is almost a forgotten art.
Yeah, I remember in my 20s realising that to be earnest was seen as a bad trait. To be passionate and earnest about things was like seen as cringe. I'm just like feeling really dismayed that that's how people were seeing that and also policing themselves as well as each other.
I remember being adolescent, and I remember the change that happened when the young adolescent boys were allowed to continue to be really quite childlike. But there was a sudden change amongst the young women that was policing each other to such an extent that they came across in all kinds of very conventional ways. And they created a kind of conformist clique in the large part, but then they excluded a whole group of other young women that hadn't sort of joined in with that. And I see that dynamic in films and I see it in popular culture. The pressure to conform and to take on this women's grown-up female persona at such an early age that is dictated by society. Even as a child myself, I was astonished by it. But then I did have a 12-year-old young woman, my future wife, to talk to about it.
We've come to the end of the broadcast. It's been a great, interesting discussion, and thanks for everyone taking part, and thanks especially to the people that share these posts that help us have these discussions and give us a template to work with, because there's so much out there. There's a lot of interesting stuff that's being talked about. So this is live Unmasked for Sunday the 22nd of December 2024, which is part of Spectrum Voices Conversation, which is here every Sunday from 5:55 PM to 7:30 PM via Facebook and Podbeam and other platforms. I'll say good night from myself and hand over to Jules.
Great, Harry. Really enjoyed the show. It just gets more and more interesting as we get more and more voices here joining us. And this is the part of the show where we talk about what we're doing here at Autistic Radio and Autistic Association, the fully autistic charity that supports the work we do. I was asked recently if any of the people who run the charity are autistic, and I was able to say that all of the trustees are autistic. Everything that has been achieved by that charity has been achieved by autistic people, standing up in a punk rock way for their own way of doing things. We have a range of characters, always. that come through Autistic Radio, and we embrace that. If anybody who's worked with us and they decide to move away for a bit and pause what they're doing with us, that's absolutely fine, and everybody is always welcome to return. Currently, I have to report that we have a little bit of activity on social media, pointing out that we have been platforming the ABA and PBS communities, our series, ABA, PBS, Behaviorism, the big autistic conversation. And I'm going to put my hands up and say, yes, we have been platforming the behaviorist community. We have been platforming them so that they come onto the platform at the same level as us, and we sit at the same height seat, at the same height table, and we look across that table metaphorically with eye to eye. And we do it in a way where we are comfortable as autistic people, and we discuss things like grown-ups. I'm rather hoping that the people out there who will be encouraged to look on that conversation as something that goes against their sense of identity will make a fuss. I hope they will make a fuss in order to create enough publicity for people with flexible minds to listen to those conversations. Because behind the scenes, there are another set of conversations being made. Behind the scenes, some of the most influential people who advocate for autistic people, some of the heroes out there, are making podcasts with us for the second series, which looks at things from a very autistic point of view. So, if on social media bad news travels fast, then we'll take that advertising. Because when people hear what we do, they will make their own choices and their own judgments. I have some really nice news to tell you. We have a very short period of time to claim it, but there's a $2,500 grant that we can pick up and put it into the charity's funds if we want it. It comes from one of the big charities, Scottish Autism. Well, it doesn't originate there, actually. They're the gatekeepers. Where it originates from is a fund that has a specific allocation for autism projects. And they have passed money to Scottish Autism, shaving off a bit of the cheese and passing the cheese in our direction. I've had a look around the cheese to see if there's a big mouse trap, and I don't think there are any strings attached that we would be uncomfortable with. I don't think it in any way compromises our independence from big charity. But what they are offering to do is to follow our model of the home kits that go out to people, to lend these out to some of the APOs, the Autistic People's Organisations, so that they can have them short term, do some work with us, and then send them back, and then it will be a pool of equipment. And there are other ways we can discuss how we use that money as well. So there's a big positive coming there on the outside as well.
No, great news, great opportunity. A voice of support for your update. And thank you for all your hard work, as always.
That's kind of yourself, Harry, and also Raymond in the text I can see there.
Spectrum Voices Conversation is an Autistic Association production for autisticradio.com. If you have something to share with us, if you need a voice, you can make different kinds of programs with us. You can make a 10-minute short, or you can join us for a podcast to talk about a subject that is dear to your heart or something you think needs a wider audience. We have an open door policy for divergent views. We do not necessarily agree with everything that we share on our Facebook pages or the words expressed in our podcast. There are a lot of different divergent views which we are trying to allow get aired so that people can see things from different people's vantage points. We hope that you will join that conversation. Contact us through any of our links, Facebook, by email, directly to us.